5 science-backed habits that dramatically reduce your cancer risk after 50. I want you to stop whatever you are doing right now and pay attention to this one number: 39.5%. That is the lifetime probability that you, or someone sitting next to you at dinner tonight, will be diagnosed with cancer. Nearly 4 in 10 people. That is not a distant statistic. That is your brother, your spouse, your best friend, maybe you. Now here's what the headlines almost never tell you. The World Health Organization has stated clearly that between 30 and 50% of all cancer cases are entirely preventable. Not through medication, not through surgery, not through expensive genetic testing, but with lifestyle changes alone. Let that sink in. Half of all cancer cases, preventable. And here's the part that should genuinely alarm you. The window between age 50 and 70 is the most critical period in which the choices you make every single day are either quietly protecting yourselves or silently accelerating their destruction. Most people in that window have no idea this is happening. Most people are losing ground and calling it aging. What if that is not inevitable? In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific, biologically grounded habits that the most current oncology research shows can measurably shift your cancer risk. Not vague wellness advice, not supplements your neighbor recommends. Specific cellular mechanisms documented in human trials that you can begin acting on before you finish watching this video. And stay with me until the end, because habit number 1 is the one that ties everything together. It is the single intervention that amplifies every other habit on this list. It costs absolutely nothing, and almost no one over 50 is doing it consistently. I have spent years working in oncology and clinical medicine. I have sat across from patients in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who received diagnoses that, looking back, were years, sometimes decades in the making. What those years taught me is something the medical system rarely has time to communicate clearly. Cancer is almost never a sudden event. It is the end point of a long, slow biological conversation between your lifestyle and your cells. And that conversation is one you can actively, meaningfully influence. Today's video is not about fear. Fear is easy to generate and nearly impossible to act on. This video is about biology, your biology, and the specific evidence-backed choices that shift your internal conditions of your body away from vulnerability and toward protection. We are going to cover 5 habits. Each one addresses a distinct biological mechanism involved in cancer development. Each one has published human trial data behind it, and they work synergistically, meaning when you combine them, the effect is far greater than the sum of the parts. I will tell you right now, habit number 1 is the one that I would prescribe to every patient over 50 on the planet if I could. By the time we get there, you'll understand exactly why. Let's begin. Habit number 5, eliminate ultra-processed foods. I want to start with something hiding in sight plain inside most people's kitchens and causing invisible damage at the genetic level every single day. Ultra-processed food. Now, I know what you're thinking. You've heard this before. Eat less junk, eat more vegetables. You've been hearing that your entire life, but I'm not here to tell you to eat better because it sounds virtuous. I'm here to show you the specific molecular mechanism by which ultra-processed food is actively dismantling your cancer defenses, right now, today, with every bite. Here's what's actually happening inside your body. Ultra-processed foods, packaged snacks, reconstituted deli meats, instant noodles, sugary cereals, the engineered products that dominate most grocery store shelves, are consistently loaded with refined carbohydrates, industrial seed oils, artificial additives, and emulsifiers. When you eat them regularly, they activate a signaling molecule inside your cells called nuclear factor kappa B. Scientists abbreviate it NF-kappa B, and if you remember nothing else from this section, remember this name. NF-kappa B is essentially a master switch for cellular inflammation. When it's chronically activated, as it is in people eating a diet high in ultra-processed foods, it does something deeply dangerous. It promotes the survival of damaged cells that otherwise would self-destruct. Your body has a built-in quality control system for defective cells. It's called apoptosis, programmed death. When a cell accumulates DNA damage and can't repair itself, apoptosis tells it, your time is up. Destroy yourself before you cause a problem. NF-kappa B overrides that command. It keeps damaged, potentially pre-malignant cells alive, and when those cells stay alive, they keep accumulating mutations. That's not a metaphor. That is the foundational mechanism of carcinogenesis, cancer formation. The evidence is not subtle. A landmark cohort study published in the BMJ in 2018 tracked over 104,000 adults through the French Nutrinet Santé project and found that a 10% increase in the proportion of ultra-processed food in the diet was associated with a statistically significant 12% increase in overall cancer risk. A 2022 review in the European Journal of Nutrition, drawing on 19 prospective cohort studies, confirmed elevated risk for colorectal, breast, and ovarian cancers across multiple populations. So, what do you do with this? You don't need to eat perfectly. The research doesn't demand perfection, but it does support one clear, immediate, actionable shift. Replace one ultra-processed item per meal with a whole food equivalent. Not all of them at once, not a dramatic dietary overhaul starting Monday, just one swap per meal. Morning cereal becomes oats with berries. The packaged snack bar becomes an apple and a handful of walnuts. The processed deli meat becomes a hard-boiled egg or a piece of grilled chicken. These are not sacrifices. They are what I call cellular protection choices, and every single one of them reduces your NF-kappa B activation and your systemic inflammatory load. Habit number 4, optimize your sleep architecture. Now, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. How many hours did you actually sleep last night? Not how many hours you were in bed, not the time between when you closed your eyes and when your alarm went off. How many hours of genuine, restorative sleep did your body actually get? Because if the answer is less than 7, and for most adults over 50 it is, I want to show you what's happening inside your immune system while you're lying there awake at 2 in the morning. Your body contains a class of cells called natural killer cells, NK cells. Their job, quite literally, is to patrol your bloodstream and tissues, hunt down aberrant cells, including early-stage cancer cells, and destroy them before they can establish themselves. Think of them as your body's elite internal security force, quiet, invisible, working around the clock. Here's what most people don't fully appreciate, including most physicians in non-oncology specialties. NK cell activity is almost entirely regulated by your sleep, specifically by the deep, slow wave stages of non-REM sleep, stages 3 and 4, that dominate the early part of the night. During these stages, your body releases a cascade of cytokines, signaling proteins that directly activate and amplify NK cell production and function. Disrupt those stages, and your internal security force goes offline. Now add this. After age 60, the proportion of slow-wave sleep your body naturally generates drops by approximately 50%, a finding documented in sleep medicine reviews. Your cancer surveillance system is already running at half capacity by default, and every night of poor sleep compounds that deficit. The numbers are staggering. A 2019 study from the University of Chicago, published in the Journal of Experimental Medicine, showed that just 1 week of sleeping fewer than 6 hours per night reduced natural killer cell activity by 70% in otherwise healthy adults. Not 7%, 70.
a meta-analysis from the International Agency for Research on Cancer, pooling data from 27 studies and 750,000 participants, found that chronic short sleep duration was associated with a 40% increased risk of breast cancer and a 36% increased risk of colorectal cancer in adults over 55. 70% reduction in cancer surveillance, 40% increased risk of cancer from sleep alone, from a habit you engage in or fail to engage in every single night of your life.
Here is your starting point, and it is simpler than you might expect. Sleep researchers call it anchor sleep. It means committing to the same wake time every single morning, including weekends, because your wake time anchors your circadian rhythm far more powerfully than your bedtime. When your circadian clock is consistent, your slow-wave sleep stages deepen automatically. Even 1 week of consistent wake timing produces measurable improvements in sleep architecture in adults over 50. Set that alarm. Keep it, even on Sunday. Supporting that, reduce artificial light exposure after 9 in the evening. Keep your bedroom cool between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, or 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. These are not trivial comfort preferences. They are direct inputs into the depth of your slow-wave sleep in the activity of your NK cells. Here is where most people completely misunderstand this. I want to pause here for a moment because I anticipate the reactions some of you are having right now. This sounds like general wellness advice. I understand that reaction. We live in a world where every podcast, every supplement company, and every wellness influencer is telling us to eat better and sleep more. It starts to feel like noise. But I need you to see what I am actually describing here, because it is not wellness noise. I have just shown you a specific inflammatory signaling molecule called NF-kappa B that keeps damaged cells alive. I have shown you a specific immune cell class called natural killer cells, whose activity drops 70% with 1 week of poor sleep. These are not metaphors. These are named, documented, published biological mechanisms that have been studied in tens of thousands of human patients and published in the BMJ, the Journal of Experimental Medicine, and AIRC's own research output. What we are talking about is not lifestyle optimization. We are talking about direct intervention in the molecular pathways that determine whether damaged cells in your body get destroyed or allowed to grow. And habit number 3 is where this gets genuinely surprising, because the intervention involves something most people over 50 are doing every single day, but almost none of them are framing correctly. Habit number 3, purposeful daily movement. I am going to deliberately avoid the word exercise for this entire section, because the moment I say exercise, a significant portion of people over 50 either think of something they used to do but cannot no longer do, or something they know they should do but cannot make themselves start. Either way, the word itself creates resistance, and that resistance is the enemy of the biological mechanism I am about to describe. So forget exercise. What I am talking about is purposeful daily movement, and its effects on cancer biology are extraordinarily specific. At the center of this mechanism is a hormone called insulin-like growth factor 1. In youth, IGF-1 drives healthy cell development and tissue repair. After 50, when IGF-1 levels remain chronically elevated, as they do with sedentary behavior, it behaves more like a biological fertilizer for cancer cells. It tells damaged, proliferating cells to keep growing when the correct biological signal should be stop. Regular, moderate movement is one of the only lifestyle interventions with consistent, replicated evidence for lowering baseline IGF-1 levels, and simultaneously, it upregulates a tumor suppressor protein called p53, often described in oncology literature as the guardian of the genome. p53 is your cell's most powerful internal stop signal against malignant transformation. When it is active and abundant, damaged cells get halted before they become dangerous.
When it is suppressed through sedentary behavior, among other things, that stop signal weakens. Now here is the part that surprises almost everyone. A 2022 study published in The Lancet from the University of Queensland found that simply breaking up prolonged sitting with 5-minute walks every hour reduced blood markers of tumor-promoting inflammation by 27%. No gym, no structured program, no equipment, just standing up and walking for 5 minutes every hour. A large 10-year prospective study tracking over 186,000 adults published in JAMA Oncology found that those who met the WHO recommendation of at least 150 minutes of moderate movement per week had a 42% lower risk of colon cancer and a 38% lower risk of breast cancer recurrence compared to sedentary controls. Your implementation is this. Begin with a 20-minute walk after your largest meal of the day. Research from Stanford confirms that post-meal walking specifically reduces the postprandial glucose spike, the sharp rise in blood sugar after eating, by up to 33%. That glucose spike matters because cancer cells disproportionately rely on glucose as their primary fuel source. This principle, known as the Warburg effect, is one of the most well-established observations in tumor biology. When you blunt that glucose spike with a walk, you are directly interfering with cancer cell metabolism. You do not need a gym membership, you do not need new shoes or a training plan, you need your front door in 20 minutes after dinner. That's your starting point today. This is where most people get it completely wrong. Here is the mistake I see most often, even among health-conscious, informed adults over 50. They optimize their diet, they prioritize their sleep, they get their movement in, and they consider themselves largely covered. What they leave completely unaddressed is what I consider the single most underdiagnosed biological driver of cancer after 50. It's not a food, it's not a toxin, it's not something in your environment. It's chronic psychological stress, and it's doing something to your DNA repair genes that most people have absolutely no idea is happening. Habit number 2, strategic stress regulation. I know how that sounds, stress management. It sounds soft. It sounds like something printed on a motivational calendar, not something discussed in a clinical oncology setting. I want you to see what I am actually describing here, because it is not wellness noise. The mechanism here centers on a hormone called cortisol, your primary stress hormone. Short-term cortisol release is entirely healthy. It's your body's emergency response system, and it's brilliantly designed. The problem is not acute stress. The problem is what happens when cortisol stays elevated for weeks, months, and years, the kind of slow, grinding, relentless stress that many adults over 50 carry so habitually they've stopped noticing it.
When cortisol is chronically elevated, it does 3 things that are directly relevant to cancer biology. First, it suppresses the expression of BRCA1 and BRCA2, your 2 most critical DNA damage repair genes. These genes are the proofreaders of your genome. When a cell copies its DNA imperfectly, which happens billions of times a day throughout your body, BRCA1 and BRCA2 are responsible for catching those errors and correcting them before they become permanent mutations. Chronically elevated cortisol measurably reduces their expression. Your genome's proofreading system becomes less accurate. Errors accumulate. Second, chronic cortisol reactivates NF-κB, the same inflammatory master switch we discussed in relation to ultra-processed food. Stress and a poor diet are not 2 separate problems pushing in the same direction. At the molecular level, they are triggering the same pathway. Third, chronic cortisol reduces the activity of tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, the immune cells specifically responsible for identifying and attacking established cancer cells. Your immune system's ability to recognize and respond to early tumors is directly compromised by unmanaged chronic stress. The research is striking. A 2022 study from Ohio State University's Comprehensive Cancer Center, published in Nature Immunology, found that chronic psychological stress reduced tumor-infiltrating lymphocyte activity by 48% in adults over 60. A 2023 meta-analysis from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, drawing on nearly 490,000 participants, found that adults with clinically elevated chronic stress markers had a 43% higher risk of developing hematological cancers, including leukemia and lymphoma. 43% from stress. That is not a rounding error. That is a primary driver. So what is the minimum effective dose of stress regulation? A 2021 study from Carnegie Mellon University established it precisely. Just 12 minutes of daily mindful breathing, practiced consistently for 8 weeks, reduced salivary cortisol levels by 26% and measurably improved natural killer cell counts in adults over 55. 12 minutes. You do not need a therapist, a retreat, an app subscription, or a meditation cushion. You need a quiet chair and 12 minutes. The technique: breathe in through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale slowly through your mouth for 8. This is called the 4-7-8 pattern, and it directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the biological counterweight to your stress response, and drives cortisol levels down. 12 minutes, once a day, every day. That is your starting point. And it is also the single most underutilized cancer protection strategy in modern preventative medicine. Now, everything we have covered so far has been preparation for this, because habit number 1 does something that none of the others can do alone. It activates a biological process that scientists only fully characterized within the last 15 years, and it is the reason I call what comes next the master lever of cancer prevention. Habit number 1. Time-restricted eating. I need to reframe something for you before I explain this, because this habit is frequently misunderstood, poorly communicated, and dismissed as a dietary trend by people who have never looked carefully at the underlying biology. What I am about to describe is not a weight loss strategy. It is not intermittent fasting in the way fitness culture has packaged it. It is a specific biological protocol that activates one of the most powerful anti-cancer mechanisms your body possesses, and it's triggered not by what you eat, but by when you stop eating. The mechanism is a cellular process called autophagy, from the Greek autos, meaning self, and phagon, meaning to eat, self-eating. Here's what actually happens. When your body enters a fasted state, typically between 13 and 16 hours after your last meal, it activates a process by which your cells begin to identify, dismantle, and recycle damaged internal components, misfolded proteins, defective mitochondria, pre-malignant cellular structures that have accumulated through normal cellular aging. Think of it as your body running a deep internal diagnostic, a cellular-level cleanup cycle that removes biological debris before it can cause structural damage. It's one of the most elegant and extraordinary processes in all of human biology. And here's the problem. After age 50, autophagy efficiency declines by an estimated 40 to 50%, according to research published in Nature Cell Biology. That decline is partly a consequence of aging, but it's massively compounded by modern eating patterns. With food available from 6 in the morning until 10 or 11 at night, most adults never sustain a fast long enough to trigger robust autophagic activity. Your body has a cleanup mechanism, but you're never giving it the quiet time it needs to run. When damaged cells are not cleaned up, they accumulate. And accumulated cellular damage, misfolded proteins, dysfunctional mitochondria, pre-malignant cellular structures is the foundational biological substrate of cancer formation. The evidence for time-restricted eating and cancer protection is among the most compelling in current lifestyle medicine research. A landmark randomized controlled trial from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, followed 218 adults aged 55 to 70. Those practicing a consistent 14-10 eating window, eating within a 10-hour period and fasting for 14 hours, showed a 37% reduction in markers hours of oxidative DNA damage and a 41% improvement in tumor suppressor gene expression at 12 weeks compared to controls. With no caloric restriction required, they ate the same amount of food, they simply ate it within a defined window. A 2019 study from the University of South Carolina published in Cell Metabolism found that a consistent 10-hour eating window produced a 34% reduction in IGF-1 levels, the same growth hormone targeted by movement, and a 29% reduction in CRP inflammatory markers. But here's what makes this habit number 1 above all the others. Time-restricted eating does not just produce its own protective effects, it amplifies every other habit on this list simultaneously. It lowers IGF-1, the same pathway your daily walk targets. It reduces cortisol rhythm disruption, supporting the stress regulation you are practicing every morning. It deepens and extends your slow-wave sleep stages, directly increasing NK cell production. It reduces systemic inflammation, even when your diet isn't perfect. Pull this lever and everything else becomes more powerful. That's why it's the master lever. The implementation is simpler than almost anything else on this video. You don't skip meals, you don't count calories, you don't restrict what you eat. You simply establish a consistent 10 to 12-hour eating window and then protect it. If your first coffee with milk is at 7 in the morning, your kitchen closes at 7 in the evening. If breakfast is at 8, your last bite of food is at 6. Outside that window, water, plain black coffee, or plain unsweetened tea. Nothing else. Your body does the rest. That's it. A small shift in the timing of your meals, a profound shift in the biology of your cells. Conclusion. Let me bring all of this together for you, because what I have shared with you today is not a collection of disconnected health tips, it's an integrated biological strategy, each one addressing a specific molecular pathway, each one making the others more effective, all of them working in the same direction. Habit number 5, eliminating ultra-processed foods, reduces NFKB-driven inflammation and protects the DNA repair machinery that becomes 30 to 40% less efficient after 50. Habit number 4, optimizing your sleep architecture, restores the natural killer cell activity that forms your body's primary internal defense against early-stage cancer cells, and which drops by up to 70% with chronic poor sleep. Habit number 3, purposeful daily movement, lowers IGF-1, the growth hormone that accelerates cancer cell proliferation, and activates P53, the tumor suppressor that tells malignant cells to stop. Habit number 2, strategic stress regulation, normalizes your cortisol rhythm that suppresses your DNA repair genes and disables your immune surveillance system. Habit number 1, time-restricted eating, activates autophagy, your cell's deepest repair and cleanup mechanism, and amplifies every other habit on this list. I want to say something to you directly before we close. The research I have shared with you today does not come from studies of 25-year-olds with ideal genetics. It comes from studies of people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, people who made targeted, consistent lifestyle changes and produced measurable, documented biological improvements, not theoretical improvements, actual changes in their DNA repair gene expression, their tumor suppressor activity, their NK cell counts, their inflammatory markers. Your cells are not fixed. Your risk is not sealed. Every morning you wake up is another opportunity to shift the biological conditions inside your body. I'll leave you with one question. Of these 5 habits, which one are you going to begin this week? Not all 5, just one. And what is the single obstacle standing between you and that first step? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this video gave you something of value today, something real, something you can act on, please hit the like button, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and share